minutes of January 14th.
Yes.
Are there any changes or is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Okay.
I'll second the motion.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? So it is approved. We have no one out there, so I won't read through the public forum paragraph. It'll save us a few minutes. Next item is to go through to select awardees for the Historic Preservation Awards Program for 2019. We had 2 nominations. Do you want to go through them?
Sure, I can just do a brief summary.
Okay.
So as you know, we opened up the awards starting about mid-January. So there was about a 6-week period, and there was publicity about the awards. So we did receive 2 nominations. One was for 827 Northwestern Avenue, which is a commercial property, and the other is for the Crawford, which is located at 415 Stanton Avenue. And the Crawford was previously the Crawford School. So I've just included a summation based on those applications. Didn't add any additional information or commentary. It's just a summation of what was submitted. And so the first one, 827 Northwestern, was nominated by Edie. And we appreciate receiving both of these nominations. The criteria for the nomination was restoration. And the award for restoration involves returning a building or a feature of a building to its own original appearance based on historic photographs, etc. So this building at 827 Northwestern was built around 1915, as best we can tell. It was utilized as a neighborhood grocery store from at least 1924 until 1960, and then used as other commercial uses. It was purchased as is with not being inspected just because it was close and dear, I think, to the heart of the purchaser to see this building that was a part of the neighborhood to be restored and not have it just go away. One thing I did not comment on was that it actually had to have a variance, I guess, to be used as commercial building. And so it did receive that. Exterior restoration was done, including replacing the front steps and then installation of a new front window, the size of the original. It wasn't clear what other restoration work was done, if any. I do know there was a lot of structural work that had to be done to maintain the structural integrity of the building because of just deterioration over time. Would you like to talk about that one first, or would you like me to do a summation of the other one as well at this time?
Go ahead. It doesn't matter to me. We can talk about this one.
Okay.
So I have a question. Why are we not calling this adaptive reuse? That's one of the check boxes under structural awards.
I didn't evaluate the nomination. I just put it forth for your review and for your digestion.
I think we could
And-
check that because it's going from what was once what was it originally
Grocery store.
to a hair salon.
But
Adaptive reuse.
But I think probably the rationale is that it's from commercial to commercial
Yeah, that's right.
as opposed to the other one, which is going from
Right.
school to residential, but I
When
mean,
when I filled it out, I read very carefully the definitions of each one, and I really hemmed and hawed a little bit.
yeah,
I really didn't fully, do each, really fit anyone exclusively. So I just kind of erred on caution and just went to restoration.
I think another use I think it was a bar for a while, because I think I've been there
I
with
went-
some people from
I went through the
DOT.
newspaper database and just tried to pick up
Yeah.
every single time it was an ad or an
It was
advertisement.
back in the time before I lived here, and I'm pretty sure that's the destination we went to before a Hawkeye game one year. But I couldn't say for sure, but it sure looks like it, which would have been in the late 70s, maybe early 80s.
Well, Kelly's TV definitely had it by then. So if you were being
Oh,
served there,
okay.
shh,
Yeah?
it was under the radar.
Well, maybe I'm just mistaking the building. But I wondered if it'd be adaptive reuse when I first read it, but after seeing that we had another one in adaptive reuse
Yeah.
that's much more clearly
Yeah.
fits that category, I don't have a problem with
So,
restoration.
so we don't necessarily need to check any one of those boxes,
Yeah.
right?
I do think you have to have a category for reviewing
least
it
one of them.
under.
Yeah.
And based on the application, the category was restoration. So that's where I would say it landed. And that would be, your evaluation would be based on how it fits within that category.
Right.
There were some things that weren't clear with the application as far as what materials, what the siding was used and some of that, but that wasn't, so I just went with what was said
Okay.
and did, my role is to give it to you for your evaluation and not to provide any further commentary in support or, in either way. But since Edie's here, I suppose you could ask her if you have questions,
Yeah.
but then again, you don't have that opportunity with the other applications. So whether you want to just take it as it is, or whether you want to include her in asking questions, that's, I guess, for you to decide what's appropriate.
Are there any questions for Amy? I'm guessing the variance probably was because of no parking and possibly the closeness to the,
I think probably what it was
Railroad, or-
is a non-conforming use. And when a non-conforming use is not used for a period of time, then it loses its ability to be a non-conforming use in that area. So that they probably were trying to reinstate the use because of a lapse,
Yeah.
would be my guess. I didn't read through all the details of the variance because I didn't see it as being 100% related to the application.
well, it's not a change from,
Right,
I mean, that's part of the restoration. It is just this
right,
little sliver
right.
between the railroad and the street, and there never was any parking for it and stuff like
Right.
that. So. Any other comments on the commission? Do we want to take a vote on whether to include it in the awards? Or do we wait for the other one?
Let's talk about the other one.
Okay. We'll go to the next.
All right, I'll introduce the next one. The next one, they're calling it the Crawford, named after the Crawford School that was there. Apparently, At one time, it was a one-room schoolhouse built about 1930. Additions were added as enrollment increased and demand for the space. And it was apparently used as a neighborhood school until 2001. The school district offices then occupied it and changed some of the windows and, just kind of made use of it without really keeping, making it a nice space. And so that it became noted by Preservation Iowa as one of the 7 most endangered historic properties because it just kind of fell into disrepair and yet it had this history attached to it. So I think due to some of that public outcry, I would guess you'd call it, it was purchased in 2017 and converted into age-restricted condominiums. And what was interesting for me is that this project is just now receiving its certificate of occupancy. So at first we weren't clear if it even qualified because of knowing it was in process. But actually just this week, the request for the certificate of occupancy came in.
Just under the wire.
And so it won't have the landscaping done yet, but they can go ahead and proceed to occupy it. And so the neighborhood community was very involved with this preservation of the building and requested several items that were near and dear to the heart of the neighborhood. One which was an interior item, but it was the mural preservation because that commemorated the history of the school, Ames, and the United States for over a period of 50 years. So there was a lot of interior reclamation and restoration, but as well as that, the historical detailing, they continued some of the rhythm and cadence of primary architectural details, such as matching the brick and mortar, having the limestone banding and column characteristics, window sizes and openings. So there was some new construction. There's a 3-story new construction piece that connects to the older portion with a new atrium. And so what's kind of interesting in really both of these cases is that if, as we're looking at chapter 31 and the review of our requirements for a historic district, neither of these are really true to what we would require under the historic district. But yet our awards open up for more broad than just the historic district. We don't have to limit it to those buildings or something that's already been, set aside as a landmark in the community. Right. So it's up to you to decide if you believe that either of these or both of these or none of these qualifies as being worthy of an award. And also keep in mind, well, last year we had no awards, but with the awards, there's a certain amount of PR that goes along with it that highlights historic preservation. And so I guess one question would be, if you select either all or none, well, either or all, would these projects be something that you would be proud of the community seeing as an example of the category? So in this case, Crawford, it's adaptive reuse. And as we said, the previous one would be restoration.
Any comments from the committee?
Yeah, I've been fortunate enough to visit Crawford School with one of my classes, and we met with Luke Jensen, and to my mind, it's a fantastic project, and certainly well worthy of what we're doing here. I would argue that not only should we be checking adaptive reuse, it's clearly adaptive reuse, but we should consider under special awards architecturally compatible new additions or structures, and also significant achievement in historic preservation. I think it's not a building listed on the National Register. It's not a local landmark, but the developer was cognizant of the fact that it was very important to the community, and he worked with SCAN, the local neighborhood group, to not only save the building, but also repurpose it in such a way that it would potentially benefit the neighborhood. I know I live in the SCAN neighborhood as well, and we live amongst students, and we all accept that, and we all enjoy having students around. But there's a sense that another student building in this neighborhood would only serve to tip the makeup of the neighborhood further in that direction. And again, Luke Jensen, the developer, was aware of that, worked with SCAN. And what we have now is age-restricted housing, and it's a segment of the market that gets very little play in Ames. So I think it's not a rehabilitation project to the Secretary of Interior standards, but it is an attempt to save the core of the old school, adaptively reuse it through a fairly substantial addition to the south, and help revitalize that neighborhood to a certain extent. I think it's a fantastic project. I think it deserves the highest accolades. And it really represents a prime example of the city working with a developer who's very open-minded, who did Roosevelt School, who knows how to do these projects, working with a community group that has a very definite idea about what they want to see happen with this project. All these groups coming together in a very productive and fruitful way. I'm really excited about this. I think what this says, the impact of this project goes beyond Ames, to my mind. And it shows how we're beginning to free up our thinking about historic preservation. It's not just the museum quality, restoration or rehabilitation. It's taking old buildings, if not capital H historic, and giving them new life. And that, I think, shows the evolution of our thinking about preservation. So I think this is a great project.
Okay, do we want to vote on that one?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Is it all or nothing? Can we vote for both? This is the first time I've.
Yes. If anything, it can be limited to one in each category, but we can also waive that and have multiple per category. We've
Okay.
in past years done that.
So for example, since there's 4 categories, we could theoretically have 4 awardees.
Yeah, or more.
Or more without the.
Yeah, we
right.
can go to multiples.
Edie, do you know the property owner for the Northwestern?
Mhm.
You know that? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but
No.
what was your reasoning for?
Well, I worked
yeah.
for Chris when I was working there at the time, and he bought this, and we jokingly said, "Ha ha ha, Nelson's Folly," because he didn't know what he was really getting into. Some people could have gone in there and taken one look. The south wall was gone. And the issues that the building had, and could have said, "Okay, well, pull the plug, flatten it. Here's a nice little thing." But he did feel so strongly that he wanted to have the building stay. So they were willing to, and you can see in the photos that, his entire family was involved.
Yeah.
So there was really no expense spared in saving this building. That was kind of like the reasoning why I knew, and every day I would drive by and you'd see a little more progress and a little more progress, and it looked better and better. And I know that he's gotten a lot of really positive response from people in the neighborhood, basically thanking him for saving this little building.
Well, I think partly, this wasn't all that significant a building to start with.
Mhm.
And I think it does. It certainly has been brought back from the asphalt siding covered status it had in the middle century. Originally, I think it was probably small clapboard, which it doesn't really look like that at the present time, but it looks closer to it than the asphalt siding did. So, and they did put back one of the 2 larger windows and stuff like that that bring it back toward its original look.
Yeah, they saved the flooring and they infilled it with old flooring from another room. And so by the time they got done sanding it down to where it should be, we jokingly said it was like veneer, but they took the time to do that,
Yeah.
to try to keep, I mean, I know the exterior, maybe it's 100%, but the interior, they really, really worked on.
So you're basically saying Chris kind of had like a sentimental attachment to this building. in the
Yeah,
neighborhood.
yeah, yeah. His dad grew up around the corner,
Sure,
so they always knew.
See, these seem like two separate, like distinct projects. You have one that's a personal labor of love. It has the building has a sentimental connection to the neighborhood, and the other one is more like you were explaining, a more complex commercial development, saving a building that does have a little bit more prominence in the city. I guess it just seems to me like they're different.
They're not of the same
Right.
caliber
Right.
or scope, but
They're each
I
valid
think-
in their own way.
living within the historic district, it's, just saving a Queen Anne isn't the only thing. Saving the little cottage or small building is just as important,
Mhm.
particularly when it's a major feature in the neighborhood, like this little commercial building was at the time. So I guess I would support awarding it as well, which isn't to say it's along the same line
Right.
as the other one.
Yeah, I don't think it has
Yeah.
to be necessary.
Right.
That was the distinction I was trying to
Yeah.
draw. Sure.
Do we have a motion?
I'll move to award both in each of their respective categories.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
I
Opposed?
I'll abstain.
Oh, okay.
I think I should have
Yes.
abstained since you're.
That makes sense. Then we do have two to be awarded on the April 23rd.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Our next item is the review of Chapter 31, Historic Preservation, within the city code.
So, you may not be aware or formally aware, but according to your bylaws, it does say that under the standing rules, that the historic preservation ordinance will be reviewed at least once every 4 years. So this was adopted back in 2015. So it's been 4 years, and so we're undertaking a review. And I'm not sure how best to proceed with the review, except I did provide an outline in the memo that was with the agenda packet. And so I thought tonight what we would do is go through some of the more process-oriented portions of it, the first 11 sections plus the last 3 sections. Hopefully, if we can get through all that. And then we would leave for another evening the some of the things like the design guidelines and design criteria, because I think that discussion may be more involved. But certainly, we don't have to do it this way. If we don't get very far tonight, we can take as long as is needed. It's really your desire and your input. So I don't know how you want to proceed, Peter, if you want to just kind of go through each section and kind of leave it open for discussion, or, well, let me say this as well. So when this was adopted in 2015, I think I included a copy initially in the February agenda, a link to some of the staff report that talked about the amendment that was being proposed at that time, to help you understand what it was that we were adopting versus what we had before. And So just in summary, some of the things that changed was previously you could not get a certificate of appropriateness unless you came before the commission. Staff couldn't approve any certificates of appropriateness. So it was revised so that there could be a process for some things to just be done as a staff review and so forth. And there were some questions that were raised in January about our certificate of appropriateness and how much, how many were we getting that were in response to violations versus people just submitting a request for a certificate of appropriateness. So it was very interesting putting together data from 2005 through 2018, listing all of the different certificates of appropriateness that have been given out, and then showing which ones were through the commission approval and which ones were staff approval, and then also which ones were really violations and that came about as a result of that. And really, out of all of them, there were two that were violations. So the majority are people submitting for certificate of appropriateness without being in a violation situation. So that was interesting. And then also I thought it would be helpful for you to see what kind of things, because it did feel like you were feeling a little bit out of touch with some of the process. And it seems like in general, on average, we are getting about 7 cases per year, which is what we had last year. But that's really been the average over the last, 4 years. So, so that was one thing that was changed. Another thing was some of the materials. I think we eased up on some of the requirements, allowed garage doors to be metal and not wood, and allowed some alternative materials. And I believe we also defined a difference between new construction and an alteration, and gave some distinguishing language on that.
Mhm.
But anyway, that's just a summation of what I understand happened 4 years ago. And so I'll just turn it back over to you, Peter, to lead the discussion.
Well, I haven't gone through specific items of this, but there's a couple of things that I see as maybe not working the way that we had anticipated. And one is that really there's no reporting of the staff approved ones. I know on request, we got a list over the 4 years, but I think there should be some kind of process so that the public is aware of what is being approved through the staff process. And I would suggest that just be that anything that's reviewed and either approved or disapproved be reported at the commission meeting. We wouldn't be acting on it, but that way it gets out there to the public what is happening. And the other thing is, I think we probably should somehow be tracking whether these are accomplished. And when we got the listing back in February, I just quickly, before the meeting, ran around several locations where I knew where they were, and quite a few of things, particularly that came to the commission, there's no sign of follow through, and a number of them have basically gone past their, I think they're allowed a year or 2 years.
1 year.
1 year. And they've gone past that deadline. And so technically they don't have permission anymore to do it. And I think it probably makes sense for us to put in there that they'll get a notification, 9 months in or something, or 6 months in, that please let us know if you need more time. And maybe there needs to be even a process for, I don't think it should have to go through the whole process again if they just need an extension on time. But right now, there is no extension in the process. And so those are the two thoughts that I have going into this.
Or do we change it from 1 year to 2 to give them a little more
Yeah.
time? Then we don't have to go through that process
Extra
quite
paperwork,
as, yeah.
Well, might still have to, you don't know.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
and, we don't know why we don't see the project having been accomplished. Whether, possibly there's even a change in owners or something since that time. But just several of them that I was aware of, I just went around to see if they had been done, and they hadn't.
None of them?
So
I can. speak
I
to
think
that.
a couple had been done, but there were, I think, 4 or 5 that, as far as I could see, hadn't been.
Started.
I can speak a little bit to that because I had that same question.
Okay.
And I did visit with Ray Anderson today to ask him about if in his tenure, if he had dealt with any extensions or had requests for extensions, and he couldn't recall any. It seems like I had heard something about one before, but I did reach out to the ones that were from last year, and the first 2 that were window replacement, window alteration, they did do a kitchen remodel and had a building permit and so forth. So those 2 were completed. The next 2 that were Mr. Wilcox, I reached out to him, and unfortunately, nothing, it's not apparent that anything was done at all on the garage. And the porch, it looks like some things were removed from the front of the house, but nothing proceeded. And his comment, he seemed frustrated, but he also seemed to maybe not understand the processes of engineering drawings for a building permit kind of stuff. And so I tried to encourage him to speak more with staff, and he seemed like, anyway, it's a discussion, and it may be some follow-up will be needed with him. It concerns me greatly that the response that I received, but he apparently is very frustrated and doesn't seem particularly motivated to do anything at this point. The next one, Angela and Dan Klotz, I know for a fact they were doing some interior work on their home, and she said they were going to be picking it up again and doing and completing the porch this year. And she did ask for an extension. I didn't yet speak with my supervisor to ask him if that's something we could do as staff, or if we need to bring it back to you. But their permit goes until May, so we actually have a few more meetings where we could bring it back to you for an extension. But I do believe they're acting in good faith to move their project along and do a really great job on what they're doing. The last 2 I didn't inquire because they were more recent ones. And
Okay, well, I had gone through previous years, and I know the one from 17, the front porch replacement at 829 Douglas, nothing's been done. The concrete wall, that was actually damage done as part of another one, I think from the previous year.
That one was one that there was
Yeah.
I think they'd installed the wall without a permit, and then it was damaged and they needed to replace it because they had, that was one without a certificate
Well-
initially.
It was, the damage to the wall was because of another one that we had approved. And in the process of excavating to put in a new garage, it undercut this concrete wall, and the concrete wall probably was not in compliance when it was put in years ago.
Yeah. Okay.
But since the historic district had existed,
And has
but-
that repair been done then?
the repair's been done as part, I mean, because it was really connected to the garage, the new garage that we had approved, that they damaged the neighbor's wall. And so then the application for replacing the wall that really shouldn't have been there in the first place came to us. I don't think they had done any work on the wall before we gave them the permission, other than that it was installed a number of years ago without going through any process. But of the ones that I looked at, I could see at least 3 that were not, and 2 that I put question marks. I couldn't see anything that appeared to be, but there might have been, I might have misinterpreted what the project was just from the little information we had here. But I do think there needs to be some kind of tracking, and particularly, I think there should explicitly be in the ordinance an extension process. So that, because technically the people you talk to, if they wait till after May and start doing something, technically they're in violation because their permit has expired. So I mean, to me, that's minor little tweaks to
Right.
the code, but
that's what we wanna
something
talk
that
about.
really is appropriate. 5 years of experience, we
Right.
realize we need to make some tweaks.
Right. I have a question to follow up on that, if that's okay. So I know at the meeting in January, there was some discussion also about the reporting and feedback on the COAs. And in putting this together, I was just curious if, instead of trying to do it every meeting where there may or may not be something, if it would work to do like an annual report where we do a summation of the year, it may be, at the end of the year or something. If that would suffice, or
I
if you
think for the
not?
public, there's a good reason to have it on the month, any particularly things that have been approved over the last month.
Okay,
So that if people see something being done, they know whether it's being done legally or not. I've had a couple people within the neighborhood come to me knowing I'm on this commission and ask about things. One of them happened to be something we had discussed here on the commission, and I could say, yes, they had a permit, or I mean, they had a COA for that. But I think just as a way for the public to know that things are being approved, I think it's I think it's an excellent idea to have an annual summary. But I do think something should be reported each meeting.
okay,
So if we skip a month, it'd be for any approvals that have been given since the last meeting.
And would it be a formal agenda item or would it just be under staff
I think
discussion?
I think it should be a formal agenda item.
Okay.
And
So I have a question. I'm looking at the spreadsheet here, and of the going back 4 or 5 years here, there have only been 2 cases where people started the process without obtaining the COA beforehand. And so to my mind, we have a fairly good track record. Something seems to be working pretty well. But I'm wondering, is there a way that we can get feedback on an ongoing basis from applicants about design guidelines, about the COA process? Not just from the ones who go forward with their project without getting our approval, but for all of them. I'm just thinking if we do want to try to make the process, the COA and the design review process more transparent, more easy to understand, it would do us a lot of good, I think, to understand how the members of the public are perceiving this and working through the process. Is there a process in place already to get feedback from them?
I know of no process on
Yeah.
that. But what we do have is their application with probably a phone number and maybe an email where, we could do some kind of.
Could we do like a follow-up?
We could do a follow-up or reach out to them and just say that the commission is interested in your feedback on the design guidelines and the process for your COA, and if you have any. And we maybe could do some kind of a survey
Yeah, I
with some
like these.
standard questions so we actually could have apples to apples in the responses, perhaps.
I would like to
okay.
see that.
Yes,
I think that's,
Okay.
I think-
Well, it's something we can work on, and I don't know if exactly if it's something we'll try to get done right away before the next meeting, because it might be helpful if we could reach out to those folks before we start talking about the design standards and design guidelines.
right.
But
and again, I sound like a broken record here, but I just spent a couple days out in Dubuque with one of my classes and working with the city and preservation nonprofit out there and some other preservation minded folks. And one of the things that the city out there has done tremendously well is they've made this process as clear as possible and as graphic as possible. Their website is richly illustrated, and there are do's and don'ts. And, I think we don't have a bad track record, so I don't think we have to do that just to stave off problems that we're continuously seeing rising, because we're not seeing them. But it would just make, I think, the public more comfortable with what we're trying to do and more comfortable with the process for themselves, and would inform their thinking about projects within the district. So I think this would be a good first step as we move towards, a clearer process, a better website to describe that process.
We're only able to look at the ones that have gone through the process too.
Right.
What about the people who are sitting at home scratching their heads? They don't know what to do. What you're talking about is there might be people out there that need that guidance.
Right. Well, I think if we can make it easier and we have 1 or 2 fewer applicants come to us after they've started work, before they've obtained the certificate, or a couple, handful, 10, 20, 100 people that might have done rehab work on their property, but for a process they don't understand. And I just, if we could make that easier somehow, I think that would be great.
Yeah, I think I'd give an explanation, a couple of these that say yes. The one for replacement of 3 windows, they had actually replaced them with non-conforming
Right.
windows.
Right. And it was a contractor error, I think, if I remember that one correctly.
No, I think it was the owner had wanted it that way, but he was able to get the manufacturer of the windows to change them. But he had ordered non-openable, a one-piece window to replace windows in a turret on his house. And he was able to get different ones from the same company and worked it out. So he got credit back for what they took back out. But yeah, that one was clearly he had just proceeded and not paid any attention to the standards. The other one, that concrete wall, we ended up approving repairing it, even though it was originally a non-conforming item. But they hadn't, the application for the repair to it actually hadn't been done. It's just that the original construction had been, but it had been like 12 or longer years prior. And so we ended up allowing it to be repaired.
Well, what would you think about looking at chapter 31 and just starting at the top and going through, and maybe you've read it and maybe you haven't, but we could just do a section at a time and see if you have any comments on those sections?
Sure.
Would that make sense?
We could go through a section at a time, yeah.
Right.
First one being the purpose. Does anybody have any? Yeah, I'm sure it's not easy to do on a small screen.
And we can cycle back through these if you didn't have a chance to read some of this ahead of time, and then later you decide there's something lacking from the purpose statement that really should be in there, and we're still in this process of reviewing. I don't think we have to do this totally in a linear fashion. My opinion is with chapter 31 is this is really something that staff uses, and that when we've had people, asking about getting a COA, we direct them to where the application is, and the application form kind of gives guidance as to what they have to submit. But most people aren't reading this. This is more for our guidance in implementing, the code.
I guess I don't think we're going to get anywhere just going through section by section here. I guess if people have comment, I look at it more that it's from looking at the process and how it's working or not working.
Okay.
I don't personally feel the need to tweak specific language unless somebody has identified it's been a problem. And to me, it's more that I think looking at the process, I see a few steps that aren't addressed and things should be added to have the reporting and the follow-up. I think maybe if we do a solicitation of people that have used the process, they might have some comments about things that weren't clear to them or something like that. But unless anybody up here is aware of something that we think needs to be changed, I don't think just reading through the sections is
You would
gonna
see it in
do
the process as you describe it. I don't really see that in the process. I have read this. This is kind of boilerplate stuff. I mean, you see this in pretty much every city to a greater or lesser extent. The one question I had, but I answered it, was and mentions of historic districts. It gets a little confusing because if you have to go back to the definitions to understand that historic districts are specifically locally designated districts, not National Register, because I don't know if that could be made clear without going back to the definition, just so that, when we read through this and we see mention of Old Town, but no mention of the downtown district, it's because Old Town is a local district, right?
Right.
National Register, the downtown one is just National Register. Yeah, it's.
Yeah,
Were you-
that is a distinction that I don't know. I don't know that that's something that's needed in here. It's maybe there needs to be some explanation in a cover letter or something saying how this applies, because I've had a lot of people thinking that downtown will now be subject to these,
Right.
which it won't be,
Right.
because it's only a national district, and not that this applies to locally designated sites or districts.
So I have a question. Is it appropriate for us to ask staff to give us a presentation, for lack of a better word, on how this could be made more usable by members of the public? And so where I'm going with this is, I think it would be useful for all of us if we could see what a city like Dubuque has done to make all this easier to comprehend for people considering going through the COA process. And I'm thinking maybe in a month's time or 2 months' time, if staff could prepare a presentation and put it up on the screen, and maybe even walk us through the City of Dubuque's website to look at how they take all this information in here, which is fairly endless when you start to read it. And describe how the City of Dubuque has taken something very similar to this and made it more understandable. I think that would that be helpful?
Yeah.
Can we do that? Can we ask that you? that
I
staff
think
do that?
I think it's appropriate to ask, and I think as long as we have some leeway on how much time we have to fit it into our other demands. But I think that fits well within the goals that I conveyed to the CLG, that for your commission, and I'm being one of those, was the website and
Right.
making it more with more data that's helpful for people. So I think that fits well within that. Certainly, if there's something that's very time demanding, it has to be, considered by the director and approved and so forth. But I certainly will ask him about that, but I don't think that would be a problem, especially since you're not saying for the next meeting necessarily,
Right.
It's not pressing.
Right.
Yeah, I think our process of reviewing this is something that we'll do this year, but it doesn't have to be by next month
Right.
type of thing. But yeah, and I'm sure in the case of Dubuque, they've got an ordinance that's probably very similar to this.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, but they've put a user interface between that actual legal document and the
Right.
public that maybe makes it easier for the public to navigate and to understand where they have to go.
And it might be helpful if you haven't looked at an application lately for a COA to look at that. But I think we usually give you a copy of it when someone is coming
Mhm.
forward.
Right.
But as is the cases with a lot of our zoning ordinance, where the rubber meets the road is at the application level. And many times within the application, there are questions that have to be addressed as the review is done. and so forth. So it guides the person who is applying to give answers, hopefully that the staff can utilize, that are answered complete enough to be utilized for an analysis and a presentation back to the commission or to the board, whomever it might be.
Yeah, I think that's where we're at somewhat of a disadvantage because by the time any application comes to us, staff have worked with the applicant
Right.
to try and make sure it's complete. And so we don't know what the normal application comes in, what people haven't understood, what staff have had to work with them to get that completed.
Right.
And so I think, yeah, feedback from staff as to what they may see as things that have created problems. And it might be the actual language of this isn't clear and staff are having to interpret it. But if multiple people are having problem with a particular section, it may be appropriate to change the wording in the actual ordinance. So,
Are you saying you want to table the review? then?
yeah, I think we'll wait till next month and get some more feedback from staff and a report. So yeah, if you want to move to table.
Yep, move to table till next month.
Second?
Second.
Have to look around.
Like controversial.
All those in favor, say aye.
I,
Opposed? Okay, we're to commission comments. Does anybody else have comments? I've got one. Go ahead.
So you had asked me to mention a couple meetings ago, is an educational effort. We had talked about trying to get somebody from the state, from the SHPO, to come to Ames to talk to folks in the new downtown district about state and federal historic rehabilitation tax credits. And so I did reach out to them, and there are a number of people down there who would be willing to do it. But the contact that I wanted to put you in touch with is a staff member down there named Sarah Andre. And I don't know if you want me to give you her information now, or should I just email that to you?
If you would email it, that would be great.
And she or one of her colleagues from the SHPO would be happy to come here and talk about tax credits.
Okay.
Okay.
Did you talk any specific timeline? Because I know back in January, we were talking
Yeah.
about April.
Yeah, I mean, I think if they have enough advance notice, they're willing to come up. I mean, they're just in Des Moines, so it's not a lengthy
Okay.
junket for them.
Yeah. I think we had felt that April was probably the most appropriate, so students are still around.
Yeah.
And
I guess the flip side would be if I've been involved in some of these in the past, and it's always nicer if the weather is good to go on a walk through the downtown and have the SHPO person actually pointing out details, pointing out things that would meet the Secretary of Interior standards instead of trying to go out on a rainy April day. So
okay.
I know we have no guarantee what the weather's going to be like in April, let alone May, but they're happy to come up here.
Did you want to try to do it at your regular meeting time? Then I think that's kind of what we had talked about before. So do you want me just to see if we can get somebody for April, or if we get somebody for May, whatever, either one of those? Or to start with trying to get somebody for April?
How, we can, well, when would sunset be in April? Because we don't want to go out at, it's got to be similar to what it
Yeah,
is now.
7 now, it'll be a
Yeah, so it would
few
be
minutes
light.
early. I mean,
Yeah.
lighter, little bit longer.
I think April.
I think by April, we'd probably have a sunset of around after 8, so,
It's coming up quick.
yeah.
So remind me, did we talk about meeting here or doing a walk or a combination
We
or?
talked about, it would be great if it could be recorded.
Yeah.
And
Oh, right,
therefore, this facility would be the best for that
Right.
purpose.
Yeah.
But if you wanted to have part of it be on hand, walking, I mean, have some here and then have
Right.
also some time to walk around.
I think it'd be appropriate to start here
Right.
and maybe
Yeah.
do a loop around the downtown or something like
It's not that much. Yeah.
that. Right.
Yeah.
Because the proximity's sufficient, I think, that there's no reason to locate it somewhere else.
What day are we talking about? April would be our normal day, 9th? We late
April 9th, I think. Yeah.
sunset,
Oh, no, April 8th.
7:48 p.m. But twilight doesn't end until 8:16, so before it got dark.
So what day is it?
April 8th.
8th.
Ninth.
Okay.
No, 9th is a Tuesday.
Oh, sorry, Monday.
Oh, 8, okay.
You're right.
As early in the month as we can be.
You're welcome. You're welcome to come here on the 9th.
I'll take it twice.
All right, we'll see what we can do, and I'll reach out to her this week, and then our PR people here at the city can help us get the word out. But certainly, we would like your help as well.
If they could target folks obviously in the district, but commercial property owners is really the key here, I think.
Okay, the comment I had relates to the designation of the downtown as a historic district and the downtown facade grant program. Right now, doesn't really have any historic interests involved in it. And I was just going to suggest that possibly somebody from the Historic Preservation Commission could be included in advisory or review committee. I'm not sure what there is for the grant program, not that it's directly under our jurisdiction as a national, but I was told that right now there isn't really any historic flavor to the review process. And so with it now being a historic district, I think it would be a good idea for us to request that, and I'm not even sure whether that's is that under the planning department or?
Yes, it is
Okay.
under the planning department right now.
And do you know
But
how the review committee is currently formed?
and I don't know about the review
Okay.
committee. I know that there was some discussion about some recent applications. So we did get some applications for the downtown facade grant program, but I don't know the whole, I haven't
Okay.
paid attention,
Could-
been involved so much with that.
I guess I would just ask that staff get back to us and let
Sure.
us know
Sure.
what how the current review committee or advisory committee is composed and to look at the idea of some kind of involvement either probably from this commission, if not from the Historic Society or something like that, to somehow have, and I don't know what the criteria themselves are, so maybe it would be appropriate to look at that. Just try to see what the implications of it now being a historic district would be for that program.
Okay.
Any other comments, or do we have staff comments?
I do.
Okay.
So as part of what we did with the CLG submittal, and that was given to you for your February meeting, there was actually a work plan, a sheet that was a work plan. Interestingly enough, the city council is interested in meeting with you and having you attend a city council meeting and being part of their agenda for a brief discussion. And my understanding is that as part of that, it would be helpful if you were clear on how you wanted to move the commission forward this year. And I think looking back at that list would be good for you each to look at that. But the idea was that it might be good to meet with them maybe in May, so that you have had a little bit of time before that to think about and to start proceeding with some of your goals for the year. So certainly if we have this fellow or this person, I should say, from the state that comes and speaks in April, and how that all feeds into what you see your role, and then also having a dialogue with the city council. And it might be that your comment, Peter, about the design facade grants might be something to mention to the council. And so maybe next meeting that you guys could talk about that further. Maybe I can send you a link to the criteria, and then you have a chance to look at what the criteria currently is, and I can get you some more information on that. Because if that is something you think should be, that you would like to see an adjustment made, the council would be the ones
Yeah,
to
right.
approach with that. Additionally, if I know that there was some review of the historic preservation plan that was put together quite a few years ago, and I think there was some comments that it was difficult to track. And I think also at that time, when that was put together, that was before the Ames Historical Society was involved. And now they're doing a lot of historical things that have really, that you guys don't have to have under your purview. For example, at the plaque program, they took that on, and they're doing a lot of educational programs and so forth. So that might be a good topic also to have with the council as to what they see as your role versus what they see as the Ames Historical Society's role, But I don't have a date for sure, but there was just this idea of maybe in May, one of the city council meetings. So
Okay.
I would say, think about that, and I'll send you some information as best I can, and then maybe I'm sure over the next few weeks I'll hear more, and we'll have a date firmed up to put you on their agenda, assuming you want to be on their agenda.
What it brought up, I forgot one comment I had been going to make. I attended the neighborhood forum for the Ames Plan 2040 and asked the consultants at that time whether they were planning to meet with this commission. And they said, oh, they were sure they were going to, but they had no idea when. But he said, based on knowing what we were, that we were probably a group they would want to have some interaction with. So I just was going to ask, we meet once a month, whether they were going to want to be on one of our agendas or something. And when you brought up the city council wanting to meet with us, that would be another one that we probably need to know in advance so that we can mesh schedules for that. I'm sorry, I stuck mine into staff
And I would
comments.
encourage all of you, if you haven't already filled out the survey that's online for the comp plan, the 2040, you can go to the city's website and there's an easy link. And we really want to have input from everyone, so. But that's all I had.
Okay. If there's no other business, is there a motion to adjourn? Second?
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 We are adjourned.